heard a really amazing piece of advice for churches as we think about how we will evaluate 2020 in the life of a church. And it was a question that came from the presiding bishop's office. And the question was not how many people watched on YouTube during COVID time or any of the sort of specific metrics we're sort of used to using to think about how we're doing as a church community. The real question will be, what's the story we'll tell about Christ Church when we look back? What will we be able to say about Christ Church during this time? And while we're still in it, what do we hope we'll be able to say about Christ Church during this time? As I see it, this story of connection really has 4 parts. And there are 4 different ways that this community has been connected. And it's connected to God. We see that in our worship life, whether it's outside in somebody's backyard or online or from a mountaintop for the Feast of the Transfiguration. Our worship life has been creative and strong and faithful.
Sometimes we feel like we have a lot of strong and important traditions to uphold, and which is wonderful. But also it's nice sometimes to be free to express ourselves in new ways. And one of the gifts of this pandemic has been the ability to get creative with our liturgy and find new ways of worshiping that are still just as Christ Church as our Sunday worship, traditional Sunday worship. It has been a joy for me to explore what it feels like to worship in different places, encouraging people to get outdoors, encouraging people to worship in small groups, worship with their families, try out new liturgies from our prayer book that maybe they haven't used before. It's also been a delight to incorporate people into the liturgies in ways that they may not have participated before.
The second area in which I see us staying connected is to each other. Probably a lot of the speakers in this video have touched or will touch on this topic, but I've been so proud of Christ Church because what I've seen is people checking on each other, checking on staff, asking how they can help. There's really been an outpouring of love and concern.
I started to think about the people that I used to see, and so I started to contact people. I won't name any names, I could, but certain people, a person I knew had a problem, so I thought, well, I'll just send an email and say, how are you? I hope you're doing well, I'm praying for you. Let me hear from you when you have a chance. And so periodically the people that, well, one couple I used to see when I would come in on my way to Forum, pick up a donut hole and a cup of coffee, I would visit with these people because they were leaving from having been to the 8 o'clock service. So I contacted them sort of on a regular basis to see how they were.
A third area of connection, I would say, is an ongoing and perhaps a deepening connection with our broader community. The traditional category for this in church language is outreach. Christ Church has maintained a strong sense of outreach in this time.
Yeah, we had to move the distribution outside, and so we lost a little bit of the camaraderie and the ability to, mingle and be in conversation. A little bit of that community sense. But that was the definite first step to keep things safer. And then we let participants know what we needed from them, which was to keep a social distance, to wear masks, to come up to the table one at a time. And everybody's been fabulous about that.
Even though we're in a pandemic, we have not shied away from doing some of the deeper gospel work that we should always be doing. But particularly this summer with all the headlines and important events with Black Lives Matter as a movement and climate change. There have been so many really important questions for the common good that our world is struggling with, and we've stayed engaged with those questions on Zoom and in all kinds of ways. And so I'm really excited about the ways we've stayed connected.
In the middle of the summer, we had the terrible murder of George Floyd, and one more instance when we're called to pay attention to the kind of racial injustice in our world and the need to deal with it in the church. And so we started a study of a really helpful book that helped us look at our how the church has participated in racism and the way that we can undo and unlearn some of those racial habits that the church has been a part of. And so it was really incredible just to see how people were willing and ready to show up for those difficult conversations and do a lot of the work in our minds and in our communities, but also in our hearts.
Fourth area I would say we're connected is to the future of Christ Church. This has never been a congregation that puts its head in the sand. And our recent look through the history of Christ Church has given us even further evidence that Christ Church can weather some pretty big stuff.
Christ Church has this foundation of faith in God and faith in one another that is just unshakable. There are horrible things that can happen in the world that we've been through. We've been through wars, we've been through social unrest, we're now traveling through this pandemic. And the idea that that something like that might rattle our foundation is not even on the table for Christ Church. So I've never worried, knowing what Christ Church has been through and how we've overcome obstacles, it never once crossed my mind that this pandemic might be something that Christ Church couldn't get over or couldn't power through or couldn't maintain its identity in spite of. And so I am encouraged by stories of resilience in Christ Church past, and I see that resilience present today, and it gives me faith and confidence that there's nothing that the world could throw at us in the future that we can't weather.
And also, on the sort of more mundane level, we're in a budgeting process for 2021. And thanks to everyone's generosity and keeping up pledges and all those things, we're ending our year pretty strongly for 2020. And we've learned a lot about church in a pandemic in terms of how to budget for 2021. But part of our work right now, even while we're in the midst of really dramatic sort of events all around us, part of the work of being faithful and connected to our future is the sort of day-to-day work of planning for our budget and running a stewardship campaign and staying focused on the fact that the church goes on and that we will all be back together and the church continues even when we're not meeting inside.
Well, I guess there's two ways to look at pledging. One, it's an obligation, but I think it's really more than that. It means you're connected with a larger group of people, and your dollars, no matter how great or how small, can connect you with the work of those people and the work of the church. Through pledging, you get to be part of something bigger than yourself.
I would not have been able to testify to this
before becoming a pledger, but something that I have realized is that giving of my assets, my physical and financial assets, routinely over a period of time has helped to invest me in the long-term sustainability of this church in a way that nothing else could have, which I did not expect.
For me, as happy as I am at Christ Church, I'm easy. It's a no-brainer for me. I'm going to pledge, and I'm going to give a gift when I can. I hope that my friends in the church, my other folks, feel the same thing as I do. In thinking about money, this is a time of year when we start talking about stewardship. I'd like to encourage all of you to pledge. If you don't, give it a thought. Think about making one.